Good evening, and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam, in a very cold car, because it is below freezing outside. I've just seen The Whale, which had a lot of buzz, because it had Brendan Fraser in a lot of prosthetics, and he put on a lot of weight for the role. I think he got a pretty good response at Cannes and at Venice, or at one of them, or I don't know. Either way, it's Darren Aronofsky's new movie. I figured I'd go see it now that the AMC that I go to is back to full capacity. I was like, yeah, for sure, why not? And what we have here is just it's not a bad movie per se. I'm not saying it's bad all around. There's anything in the movie that's particularly, egregious. But here's the thing. Having now seen this movie, I have a fundamental problem with the film. And it kind of comes entirely from writing. The writing of the movie. I feel like the issue that we have here is, number one, first and foremost, and this is a big pet peeve of mine, characters don't sound like real people in this movie. It's like Brendan Fraser sounds like an approximation of an English teacher. Like, what's his name? The lead girl, Ellie, she's on Stranger Things. Sadie Sink, I think her name is. She sounds like a adult writing what a teenager sounds like, which is one of those things where it's like, okay, but like, why? Like, no teenager now or teenager, 10 years ago when I was a teenager talks the way she does. And it's just kind of like, why not, tell us the story, like, hire a second writer. I mean, like, consult another writer. And then at the end I saw it was based on a play. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because it's all entirely in one set, which is his house. Which, as I'm watching this movie, I'm kind of like, why the fuck is the color grading so weird? Because that was one of the things, at one point, there's this big dramatic scene going on, and the most glaring thing is that the lights behind the mother, Ellie's mother, underneath, like, it's like under a sink, kind of, and it's glowing, and there's a blue tint to it, and I'm like, they make lights now for movie sets that you can control how warm and the color is. Why were those not used, especially if you're going to color grade it down this blue? And the payoff for it at the end of the movie, where it's like, oh, and this is the real, like, color, it's like, I don't think the payoff is quite good enough for it. And I think part of it is definitely, I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, I get what this all is. I understand what this all is, but I just feel like it's one of those things where it's like, I don't quite think it lands what it's setting out to do properly. It's about this guy who's wallowing in depression, and he's, his partner died, also of depression, of suicide, but it was the opposite issue. Like, he eats and eats and eats, and then his partner died after, starving himself, and then jumping off a bridge, but, like, I get all of that, and I get this is an allegory for, well, I mean, not an allegory for depression, it's just a story of depression, because it's just depression, and you kind of just watch it, and you're like, and I think part of it is, too, here's the thing, I think that Brendan Fraser does a fantastic job with this movie, and I think everyone does a fantastic job with what they are given, and that is precisely the problem. What they are given is not great. They are not given a great script. The dialogue is all so weird and stilted, and it's like no person talks to them this way. It feels like this is multiple cuts of the same script or if the script was written and it's like, okay, we're going to cut some of this, because there are lines of dialogue that are verbatim, and it's not even like you're repeating it for effect, scene in, scene out. It's just one scene you do it, and then the next scene you do it again, and it's like, but the impact hasn't changed, because we haven't learned anything about the character. We're asking that question now has new meaning, and it's just kind of like, well, why the fuck is that the thing? There's a conversation that gets cut like 40 times between the two of them, and I'm like, why? How is this? This is way, like, just for building tension in a scene, this is not a good way to do this. This film is a visual medium, and one of the things that can get done in a movie that you can't necessarily do in a book or in a play is you can use edit to increase tension, and using a lot of cuts will increase the pace and the tempo, and it can increase not tension but kind of like a sense of anxiety or urgency to a scene. But for a movie like this, where it's just kind of slow, and it's designed to be slow, and we're designed to just sit here and let scenes lay where they are, and it's just kind of like the entire point of this movie is just to let things out, exercise the demon of whatever is being done in that scene, so that way it is there, and then just let it hang in the room, and let the characters react and process to it, and it's meant to be a slow character study. But when you do these quick cuts in a conversation, it kind of undercuts that in a weird way, and I think that's part of the problem with movies, that it does that too. Like, there's some weird editing issues. The color grading, it's way too blue, and I understand building a mood and using that to your advantage, and I understand, especially when we get to the end of the movie and we open the door and we let natural light in for the first time. It's just, I think that for the movie to end the way it does, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who wants to go out and see it, for the movie to end the way that it does, for the light to come in that way, it doesn't mesh with the end in a way that kind of resonates, and then for it to like slam cut to credits, and I'm just like, well, why? Why do we need, like, you don't really get a chance to deal with the raw emotion, like, and I think that's part of the problem, is that the final scene is supposed to be the raw emotion, of this character finishing out their arc over the course of the movie, and for it to just land the way it does, and for them to be like, alright, we're done, bye, it just kind of feels weird. And then the other thing is, and this is more of I don't know if it's an audience thing or if this is me thinking, like, the scenes where he gets depressed and he goes to eat are meant to be disturbing in a way, not, like, they're not meant to be comedic scenes, I don't think. Like him going and downing an entire Three Musketeers bar in, like, 3 bites is not meant to be funny. Him having the candy drawer full of, like, the drawer full of candy is not meant to be a comedic bit. Him sitting on the couch with this bucket of fucking fried chicken is not meant to be funny. But the way it's portrayed in the movie and the way it's shot gives it a comedic edge that I would certainly hope is unintentional. Because if it's intended to be comedic, it doesn't land with 100% of the audience, and that's the entirety of the levity in the movie, if that's the case. The reason I think it's not meant to be comedic is that there's no other levity throughout the movie. Or there's 1 or 2 jokes in the movie, but it's meant to be a slug. And I'm not saying, I want to be very clear, I'm not saying it has to be funny. I'm saying that if you're going to have these moments be the moments of levity in the script, and the script is going to, ride or die on these moments, then I think that they're not well executed, because it like, the laugh comes kind of like, people thought it was funny. And I'm like, I don't think that's meant to be funny. In the same way that, like, Logan, I think, had a similar issue. If you go back to 2017 when we talked about Logan, there's that scene where Professor X dies and they get him out of the house, and it's the next scene, it's the funeral. And you have Logan standing over Professor X's grave. And he goes, well, there's water, and he just doesn't know what to say. and he just breaks down, and then we hang on Laura standing over the grave and looking at, and looking at what's there. Like, we kind of just hang on that shot for a minute, and then we go back to Logan, and he's beating the shit out of the car. And when I saw that, I'm like, this is great. This is meant to be a guy who doesn't know how to process emotions. He never had that, like, a need for that skill, because he's just a warrior. And now we have him dealing with these complex emotions, and, he doesn't and he doesn't know how to process it. And it's coming out in this violent burst. And I'm like, this is great. But people interpreted it as, comedic bit. I don't think it was going to be comedic bit. And I think the same thing kind of applies here, with him, like, sitting here and taking 2 pieces of pizza and slapping them on top of each other before going to the fridge, taking a slice of pizza and dousing it with a amount of ranch dressing that I can only describe as nauseating. And it's just like, okay, I understand what he's... Like, I understand this is meant to be him binging, hoping to die faster. I understand that. I just don't think it's well executed. And I think that's a fundamental problem with this movie, is that there are so many things like that are just not well done, that when we get to the end of the movie and things are ending up the way they are, you're just kind of confused. It's the movie could have definitely been better. And I think that Brendan Fraser's performance is kind of the saving grace. In a lot of the same way that when you see Joker, like, the saving grace is Joaquin Phoenix's performance from what would be an otherwise kind of boring movie. That, like I've said before with Joker, if you had a movie called Clown, and it was, and it was the same exact thing without Joaquin Phoenix, or hell, even with Joaquin Phoenix, it would not have gotten the box office buzz that it got. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing here, where it's like, this movie, if, probably, like, if Marvel made this movie and called it Blob, maybe it would have gotten more people. I feel like that's insensitive. Well, moving on, coming to the joke. Anyway, I feel like that's kind of the key thing here, is that strong performances in spite of having just shitty material is probably the best way to describe what this movie is. I feel shitty might be a strong word. It's just not the strongest material, or not what we would, what I went into this movie expecting based on the amount of buzz I heard about it, where it's like, look, the performance by Brendan Fraser is a career best for him. And I think that alone makes this movie worth watching. Maybe not necessarily going to a movie theater to watch, but it's definitely worth watching at least once, even if you do it on home media when it doesn't inevitably go to BVOD, or it doesn't end up on a streaming service. It's A24, and I don't know where theirs... I think a lot of theirs have ended up on HBO Max recently, to be honest. I think they had that big influx a few months back, where it's like Ex Machina and Tusk, and there were a few others that ended up on there. God, I miss the days when no one knew about A24. I don't think you guys understand. Back in the day, you'd go to an A24 movie, and the theater would be mostly empty. Now it's just fucking crowded with a bunch of pretentious college kids who, are walking out like, oh, I think this is better than Darren Aronofsky's other movie. And I'm just like, he's made a few movies. You can't just be like, it's better than his other movie. Like, alright, whatever. Yeah, it's worth a watch, at least once. But unlike last week's movie Avatar, this one's worth seeing in a theater for a first view. Definitely worth seeing in a theater on first view. But we'll wrap up there for today. I think we've covered enough on this movie. The Whale is currently playing in theaters, though for how much longer I'm not entirely sure, because Avatar is currently playing, and that is like 3 hours and 15 minutes long, and then next week starts, or this weekend, starts Babylon, and I Want to Dance with Somebody, which is like, I Want to Dance with Somebody, I want to say it's like a normal length movie, it's like 2 and change, but not quite 2:30. Babylon is over 3 hours, and I'm like, really? Like, can we just fucking stop with the 3-hour movies at this point? I'm just so tired of the 3-hour movie. Can we just move on to a shorter movie? I digress. I think Babylon's what we're going to go with for this week. It'll depend, though. I don't know. It's so weird because it's the holiday coming up. I don't know what my work schedule is, so it could be Babylon. It could be, what's it called? It could be I Want to Dance with Somebody if I just want to get, a shorter movie in before Christmas. But is today? No, today's Tuesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday. So tomorrow is a new episode of Willow and a new episode of National Treasure: Edge of History. And, I think for right now, I think that just about wraps it up. I think we've covered all the ground we're going to cover. So I'm not going to stretch that anymore. Go to multipleworldproductions.com. You can see all the cool stuff we're doing, including our new podcast, Exploring Hyperspace Lanes, that me and Josie are doing. We're going to be launching the first episode of it. If you didn't already listen to it on this feed, we're going to launch the first episode of it on its own feed. So as soon as that goes up, you guys can go over there and give it 5 stars and jump and bump the listenership. We want to launch it on a good note. That'll be launching on January 4th, and then the next episode will be the week after on Wednesday, and it'll be episode 4, A New Hope, and we will also be talking about what Star Wars things in 2022 are we looking forward to that are coming this year. So, until then, have a great rest of your week.